I feel very appropriately dressed for today's video with my Dublin GAA jersey on. So, the Irish Readathon is here. We are devoting the month to talking about Irish books. Throughout the month of March, I dedicate my reading to reading solely Irish books as part of the Irish Readathon. But if you want to join in, all you need to do to participate is read just one Irish book throughout the entirety of March. I will leave all of the information for the Readathon linked down below in the description, including our announcement videos and playlists full of more recommendations for the Irish Readathon. Last year, I read 12 books during the month of March, but I obviously read a lot of Irish books outside of the Readathon as well. In fact, I read 26 books by Irish authors in total last year. Originally, I was going to talk you through all of the Irish books that I read last year, but every year for the Readathon, there are guaranteed to be books that I read in that month that will be in my best books of the year video at the end of the year. Equally, there are just some books that I don't get on with and aren't new favourites, and I didn't want to talk about those because it wasn't kind of in the spirit of the Readathon. We are celebrating Irish writing. Now, inevitably, when you read a lot of something, there will be some stuff you like and some stuff that you don't. So today I'm going to be talking about my favourite 15 Irish books that I read last year. I've also excluded anything that I read for work from this list. And I'm going to talk about these in the order that I read them in. Starting off with a book that I did read during March last year is Hey Zoe by Sarah Crossan. So I've been a big fan of Sarah Crossan for a very long time. I love the verse storytelling format. I think it lends itself a real kind of intimacy and immediacy of thought to the internal workings of a character. Hey Zoe is something that is quite different from her in terms of the form, but also the subject matter. This is adult fiction and it is told in prose, but it has the same kind of sharpness and quickness that you would associate with her verse storytelling. It's told in like fragmentations or vignettes, and that makes it a really pacey, page-turning read that you want to race to the end of. This book is about the marriage between Dolores and David, a marriage that is incredibly strained. But the complexities and strain of their relationship grows even more when Dolores discovers that David has been keeping a sex doll in their garage. We follow the fallout of their marriage and the unexpected relationship that Dolores ends up striking up with this doll. I think it would be very easy to paint David's character as this just pervy guy, but Sarah crafts a story with more complexity and nuance than that. Ultimately, this is a story about two people in a marriage that are both very lonely and isolated. It's subtle, it's compelling, and it makes you think and feel in equal measure. Then I read The Happy Couple by Naoise Dolan, and this is another one that has complicated marital dynamics. This is about Celine and Luke, who are approaching their big day, the day of their wedding. We learn that not all is as it seems in their relationship. Outwardly, they seem like a very happy couple, but there are complexities and dishonesty that runs throughout their relationship. And we hear all about this through other perspectives. We hear from the bridesmaids, the best man, other figures in this couple's life, and we are presented with their relationship through those lenses. All of those perspectives culminating in this patchwork portrait of this couple. I think this is a really great example of an ensemble novel and explores themes like monogamy and sexuality in a really interesting way. Then I read No Dress Rehearsal by Marian Keyes. Now, I did read a full-length Marian Keyes novel last year, but it just wasn't a new favourite for me. And I wanted to talk about this absolute slip of a short story, which I think it's actually quite difficult to get hold of this now, but if you can, I would really recommend it. This was part of the Open Door collection of books, which were a series published encouraging people to improve their reading skills while just enjoying a really good story. And this definitely delivers on that brief. It is quite different to some other Marian Keyes writing, both in terms of the length. Obviously, Marian Keyes books we associate with being very chunky, but also thematically, because this is a foray into the supernatural for her. It is about Lizzie, who has just died, but she doesn't quite understand that yet and can't figure out why everyone seems to be ignoring her. Then meets two spirits that are tasked with bringing her into the afterlife. But Lizzie has some unfinished business and she's not going to go before it's sorted. For such a slip of a story, it is packed with the same kind of nuance of character and witty turn of phrase that you would associate with Marion Keyes. I do remember having an absolutely brilliant reading evening, just like reading this cover to cover because it was so short. This book did make it onto my overall favourite books of the year list in 2025, and that is Thirst Trap by Grania O'Hare. So you will have heard me talk about this one before if you've watched any of my best books of the year videos. This is about a group of 3 friends who are living in a house share in Belfast, navigating the aftermath of the 4th friend slash housemate in their group dying. Unresolved conflicts in the aftermath of her death. And we follow this group of friends navigating their lives in really the worst of times. This house share was once home to their roaring 20s. It was packed full of love and laughter and enjoyment, but things are changing now for each of these girls in slightly different ways. What I loved about this book was how it captured female friendship, but also the really specific type of friendship that you have when it comes to people that you live with. It's different from just a standard friendship. And I think the intimacies of living so closely with people in that type of house share situation in your early 20s, the author did an amazing job of capturing that. The author also did an amazing job of doing that thing where she writes about something so specific that it becomes really resonant and universal because she's got so specific. I really, really loved this one. I also loved Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This was also on my best books of the year list. We had 2 books about the complexities of marriage. This is now our 3rd book about dead people. It's a book that explores the relationship between 2 brothers in the aftermath of their father dying. And I think this book does an incredible job of capturing a very Irish way of navigating grief, which is to not deal with it. Now, these 2 siblings are really quite different. So we have Peter, who is a lawyer. He's in his 30s. His life outwardly seems like it's incredibly successful, but of course, once you dig beneath the surface, there are a lot of things going on in his life, including him trying to balance relationships with 2 different women and feelings of kind of insecurity that he ends up burying. We have his younger brother, Ivan, who is much more kind of introverted, a bit of a recluse. He is this chess genius. A lot of what the novel explores in relation to his character is his complicated feelings towards women. And we see some of those potentially quite dangerous attitudes bubbling beneath the surface for Ivan. And then we also see him beginning a relationship with a older woman. I say older woman, she's not old, but he's 22 or something. The age gap between them is very significant. The book explores how the brothers continue to misunderstand one another and fail to kind of empathize with one another and put themselves in one another's shoes. And again, this is another book where I feel male characters could have been just presented as arseholes, but Sally Rooney crafts them with such fine detail that they feel like such fully fleshed out men. What I have said about this book is that I think Normal People will always be my favourite Sally Rooney book, but I think Intermezzo is her most accomplished. Then I read Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. This is one that made so many people's favourite books of the year list last year. This follows a woman named Kira who flees from an abusive marriage along with her children. And the book explores the barriers that she continuously comes up against in trying to get freedom from this man. There are lots of different kinds of barriers that she faces. One of them is her own kind of perception of what is happening to her. She continuously kind of argues with herself, trying to say that maybe what is happening to her isn't that bad because it wasn't physical abuse. Her extended family and her husband's family all getting involved in this. Perhaps most significantly, she faces so many structural and societal barriers to being able to get safety for herself and her kids. Trying to rebuild her life is relentlessly met with red tape and obstacles, an illegal and social system that isn't set up to protect women. She's a character that you root for so much, and you are continuously pleading with her to not go back to this relationship, but you can see why she considers it. This is an incredibly powerful book that at points will make your blood boil, but it is so worth it. I am just talking about these in the order that I read them, but there are definite thematic links emerging, because the next book I'm going to talk about is So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. This is another very short one, but it definitely packs an emotional punch and is impactful storytelling. This is the story of a man named Cathal reflecting on his romantic relationship with a woman and basically where it all went wrong. Throughout this story, we see how behavior towards this woman is filled with kind of quiet moments of misogyny. It's not horrible outward sexism or abuse. It is just kind of relentless moments where he fails to understand the female experience or what his partner is feeling and centers his own feelings above his partner's. I was recently trying to review another book in my monthly reading wrap up, which was also trying to show a male perspective and how his perspective of the breakdown of a relationship was so far apart from like the reality of what happened. And I don't think that book did an amazing job of that. And in the comments section, my co-host for the Irish Readathon, Aoife, completely nailed it by saying that that book failed to do in like 300 pages what Claire Keegan achieved brilliantly in like less than 50. Evenings and Weekends by Oisin McKenna was another book that made my favourite reads of the year list. I read this in the midst of a heat wave in London, and that was the absolute perfect way of consuming this book because this is set in London during the heat wave of 2019, and I so vividly remember that time because it was when I moved to London. I remember that heat wave like so specifically. And in this book, we are following a group of 30-somethings whose lives are all like interlinked, navigating all of the complexities that life brings at that time. Careers, friendships, romantic relationships, breakdowns in communication, parenthood, and your relationship with your own parents. One of the things I really loved about this book was the light it shone on seeing your parents as fully formed, nuanced people for the first time when you become an adult. How so often as adult children we fail to see our parents as complex people. It's a book that explores the queer scene in London in a way that I've never seen done before. It's gritty without being sensationalist, and it's a book that has such a real kind of social intelligence to it. It's fantastically written, and I will read anything this author writes in the future. First children's book I'm going to talk about is Giant by Judith McQuaid. This is a reimagined version of C.S. Lewis's childhood growing up in Belfast. So C.S. Lewis is Jax, who is a quite privileged young boy, and this book explores the friendship that he strikes up with a more working class kid called Davy. It's a really beautiful exploration of that friendship and how these boys just want to be friends because they get on and they both like telling stories and they both like reading. Their social and class circumstances add so much difficulty and confusion to that dynamic. It's a book that really explores the beauty of friendship and the beauty of storytelling and the power of reading for social mobility in a way that is completely accessible for a child audience. I really liked this. This was probably one of my biggest like pleasant surprises of the year. Another children's book, this is Gods Don't Cry by Ellen Ryan with illustrations from Connor Merriman. So this is, I guess, a follow-up to Girls Who Slay Monsters, which was a beautiful book all about girls and women from Irish mythology. And in this follow-up book is the turn of the boys. So we are looking at the boys and men that make up ancient tales from Ireland, the magic they performed, the battles that they overcame. I loved the angle that this book took in terms of showing really like positive portrayals of boyhood and masculinity. It really showcased the lessons that young boys and girls can take from these figures from mythology. I really loved the diversity of character in this as well. If you're an adult reader that is interested in these types of myth books, I would highly recommend it, but also, you know, for any child readers in your life, this is such a fantastic and beautiful book. Some young adult fiction. This is A Fix of Life by Kel Menton. So I would definitely say this is on the more literary side of young adult fiction. And it's a book that explores the friendship and then romantic connection between two teenage boys. And there's also really fantastic trans representation in this book as well. I think, you know, Irish young adult fiction does a fantastic job of representing a breadth of sexualities and gender identities. And this book is fantastic. A book that doesn't shy away from the challenges that you face growing up as a queer teenager in Ireland, but it's a book that really highlights that in moments of despair there are threads of hope that you can find. And as the novel progresses, there are some magical moments that are woven into the story that I think so many readers would really enjoy. Okay, we're back to adult fiction now. This is I Want to Go Home But I'm Already There by Roisin Lanigan. This is about a couple, a man and a woman, that move into a flat in a kind of up and coming like gentrified area. In theory, they should be, you know, really happy with the place that they found to live. They should feel really content with it. The woman in this relationship can't help but feel that there is something that is not quite right, and things continue to become increasingly unusual and unsettling. Like, their landlord seems to be very like suspicious. A lot of their like fresh fruit and veg seems to rot really quickly. There is damp spreading, and she's also unsettled by their upstairs neighbors. And continuously throughout the book, she feels like she's being like gaslit. Like, partner doesn't seem to recognize what's going on. This book does have a supernatural, like very light horror element to it, both horror in like the supernatural sense, but also just like the horror of the rental market is kind of the adjacent theme there. And I thought that was done really, really well. Staying with the spooky, this is Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin. So this is about a woman named Shell who has just left her fiance, lost her job, and moved back in with her parents, which isn't exactly where she wants her life to be. But one day in her local shopping centre, she sees a help needed sign in the florist, and she decides that she's going to go for it. She's going to take the job. But as the novel progresses, we realise that Neve, the owner of this florist, doesn't just need help with the day-to-day running of the florist. There is something else going on there. In fact, the really unique thing about this book is that it is told from the perspective of an orchid. This orchid that is in the shopping centre and has a seemingly insatiable hunger and an obsession about Neve. And the perspective is so incredibly unique. It's unlike anything that I've ever read before. It's a book about workplace love affairs. It is a book about the cultural significance of shopping centres in Ireland. And it's a really spooky book about an orchid that wants to eat people. Like anything I've ever read before. And it was great. Ordinary Saint by Niamh Ní Mhaoláin. This is the proof copy. I need to replace it with a finished copy because I enjoyed this so much. And this was on so many people's favourite books of the year list. And it just very, very narrowly missed out on mine. This is about a queer woman who is living in London with her partner. And she finds out that her brother, who had died years previously, is looking likely to be ordained as a Catholic saint. And essentially that brings to the surface a lot of her feelings of grief around her brother, her strained relationship with her parents, with her own understanding of religion, how her sexuality intersects with all of that, her relationship to Ireland, and specifically kind of the cultural and societal roles of religion and sexuality and family and how all of those things intersect in a very specifically Irish way. There are definitely things that I really resonated with this book in terms of, being a person that has, emigrated from Ireland and the complexities that brings up with your relationship with your motherland. What I've said about so many of these books is how acutely they're crafted, and that applies to this one as well. It becomes so universal in how specific it is. And then the final book, I read this in the concluding days of 2025. This is Baby Teeth by Meg Grehan. So I've read a few of Meg's books before. Meg writes incredible young adult fiction in verse. So we mentioned right at the beginning how much I loved Sarah Crossan's verse fiction. And Meg is another writer that I think does a phenomenal job in that form. I don't necessarily want to say too much about this one other than it is a YA female romance with a vampire. Meg does a fantastic job of using that verse form to give you such a connection with the main character because you are so like in their head, in their shoes. You're there right with them, feeling everything that they're feeling. And because it is written in verse, you will read this like super quickly. That is it. 15 Irish book recommendations for you in the Irish Readathon. Hopefully there is something here that piques your interest, but if not, as I said, there are so many recommendation videos that we've done over the years for the Irish Readathon. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you don't have anything specific to say, leave me your favorite green emoji. I found it really interesting to like think about these books, and as I was going through them, finding those thematic links between them was something that I really enjoyed. I didn't like plan for there to be like thematic links, but there definitely were. That is it from me. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.